The day Vanessa moved into my house, the wind didn't change, no birds stopped singing. There were no cracks of thunder to signal the arrival of trouble, just the dry scrape of suitcase wheels dragging across my tile and the sound of my son's voice, too cheerful, too rehearsed. "Just for a few weeks, Mom," Daniel said as he stood in the hallway, his arm around Vanessa like a shield, "until we figure out the apartment stuff." Vanessa kissed him on the cheek, then looked past him to me. Her eyes scanned the living room like a realtor sizing up a low-value listing. She smiled. "It's cozy," she said. That word stuck with me. Cozy. Not warm, not welcoming. Cozy, like cramped, outdated, like it wasn't enough. She was wearing a beige trench coat, perfectly fitted. Her hair, long and glossy, like something from a commercial, was tucked behind one ear. She looked like she'd stepped off a magazine page. Too perfect, too practiced. I didn't say anything then. I just nodded, forced a smile, and stepped aside to let her in. That was my first mistake. That night, I noticed she'd already started moving things. Subtle changes, but they were there. My framed family photo on the end table was turned slightly, almost out of frame. The throw pillows on the couch had been fluffed and reorganized, and my spice rack, my grandmother's spice rack, was completely rearranged. Cumin next to cinnamon. Thyme shoved in the back like an afterthought. It made no sense, but again I said nothing. I told myself she was just adjusting, trying to make herself comfortable. I convinced myself it was easier that way. Less drama, less risk of conflict. The next morning, I came downstairs to the sound of music, loud, bouncy pop blaring through my kitchen. Smell of burnt toast hit me. Before I even saw her, Vanessa was at the stove, dancing barefoot in my robe, which hung awkwardly on her tall frame. Avocado toast was half made on the counter, which was littered with breadcrumbs, an open jar of paprika, and 2 empty coffee mugs. "Oh hey," she said, like she lived there. "Hope you don't mind." I couldn't sleep. She didn't wait for a reply, just turned back to her playlist and tapped the volume up a little more. Daniel wasn't even awake. I made tea, slowly, silently. She didn't offer to clean the mess. She didn't stop moving around the kitchen like she owned every corner of it. And something about the way she kept humming told me this wasn't temporary. Not for her. By the end of that week, she had claimed the upstairs guest room and filled the bathroom cabinet with her products. She commented on how much detergent I used, suggested I get a more energy-efficient vacuum, left passive notes about fridge odors and spice placement. But it was the second week when I realized I had underestimated her completely. We were sitting at dinner, me, Daniel, and Vanessa. I had made roasted chicken and vegetables, like I had 100 times before. Vanessa took one bite and wrinkled her nose. "Your mom should maybe get help with organizing," she said, looking at Daniel, but loud enough for me to hear. "It's kind of depressing in here." I was 2 feet away, 2 feet. Daniel didn't even look at me. He just nodded. "Yeah, maybe," he said softly. That moment didn't sting the way I thought it would. It burned. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because what Vanessa wanted, what she needed, was a reaction. If I defended myself, she could twist it, make me the problem. I was old. I was bitter. I was controlling. That would be the story. That would be her script. And I knew, from the way she smiled sweetly the moment Daniel glanced in my direction, that she'd already written it. I began paying closer attention. Vanessa was smart. She never snapped in front of him. She played her roles well, soft and affectionate with Daniel, always touching his arm, laughing at nothing. But with me, it was like a mask slipped. Her voice turned clipped, her tone changed. When Daniel wasn't around, she'd sigh loudly as she passed me doing laundry or complain about towels being folded the wrong way. She'd open cupboards just to shake her head at how things were arranged. Once, I found my recipe book on the kitchen island, open and annotated. In pencil, but still, she had scribbled comments next to my grandmother's stew recipe. "Too much salt," she'd written. "Try adding lemon juice." She had known exactly what she was doing. I didn't say a word. I started observing the patterns. How she always made herself scarce when Daniel and I were alone, until we actually started talking. Then she'd reappear. Suddenly, she needed something from the kitchen, or she'd join the conversation mid-sentence, steering it away from anything personal. One evening, I finally tried to talk to Daniel. Vanessa had gone for a walk. I sat across from him and asked, "Are you okay? You seem different lately." Daniel looked up at me, like I had pulled him out of a dream. His eyes were tired, he hesitated, opened his mouth, and then the front door creaked open. Vanessa's voice cut through the hallway, loud and cheerful. "You would not believe what I saw at the park," she said, laughing into her phone. And just like that, Daniel leaned back, shut down, and the moment was over. She was always watching, always calculating. But I wasn't ready to strike. Not yet. I needed to be sure, because a war like this, one fought with smiles, whispers, and guilt, could only be won with silence, patience, and undeniable proof. By the start of the third week, Vanessa had claimed every inch of my house without ever saying the words. It wasn't just her belongings that spread like ivy into every room. It was her presence, her scent, her voice, her rhythm. I used to wake to birdsong and the hum of my kettle. Now I woke to the shriek of her blender and the crash of cabinet doors. She didn't walk through the house. She paraded. One morning, I stepped into the kitchen and found a color-coded chart taped to the fridge. It listed suggested weekly tasks with initials beside each one, hers, Daniel's, and mine. Vacuum guest room, L clean baseboards, L change sheets, L for Louise, me. I stood there in my own kitchen, staring at the laminated printout. She had laminated it. That wasn't a suggestion. That was a schedule. Daniel came downstairs, moments later, rubbing sleep from his eyes, reaching for the coffee pot. I didn't say a word about the chart. I just peeled it off the fridge and folded it neatly in half. "Did you see the list?" he asked, oblivious. "I saw it." He hesitated. "She just wants to keep things running smoothly." My house had run just fine for 37 years, but I said nothing, because that was the trap. Speak up, and I'm controlling. Stay quiet, and I'm complicit. Vanessa came into the room a few minutes later in yoga pants and a lemon-colored hoodie that matched absolutely nothing. "Morning," she chirped. Then she opened the fridge and said, "Ugh, is this still the same milk? I told Daniel we should start shopping organic." I smiled without teeth. "You're welcome to bring your own." She blinked, then smiled wider. "Of course. I just assumed." That was her favorite phrase. I just assumed. She assumed she could move the living room furniture. She assumed she could put decorative labels on my pantry jars. She assumed she could use my bedroom mirror to do her makeup, because the lighting was better. And Daniel? He assumed I didn't mind. Or maybe he didn't ask because he didn't want to know. Later that week, I found her in the backyard with a tape measure. I'd gone out to water the tomato vines and saw her crouched by the patio steps, squinting at numbers. I watched from the edge of the garden until she noticed me. "Oh hey Louise," she called out. "I was just thinking, we could really expand this space. Maybe build out a deck, or even a little sunroom." She gestured as if she were the one making the call, drawing invisible lines in the air with her finger. "We." "Yeah. I mean, once everything settles, it could add serious value." Value. That word hung in the air. I looked at her, my garden hose still running in my hand. "This space is just fine the way it is." She smiled tightly and stood. "Just an idea." I said nothing. Just went back to watering. The soil was dry, but the roots were strong. That's what I kept telling myself. She could move around me, talk over me, throw her bright ideas into the wind, but the foundation was mine. I had built it. Every inch of this place held memories she would never understand. She started hosting wine nights. I came home from a library trip to find 5 women I didn't know sitting in my living room, sipping rosé and giggling over real estate magazines. Vanessa waved like I was staff. "Hey Louise, we're just brainstorming home ideas." She had cleared my coffee table, moved my photo albums, and replaced them with swatches of paint samples and countertop materials. One of the women turned to me and said, "You're lucky to have such a hands-on daughter-in-law." I wanted to scream, but instead I nodded, walked to my room, and closed the door. That night, I overheard Vanessa talking in the laundry room. Her voice was low, hushed, but not quiet enough. I know. It's just a matter of time. Once we get her to hand over some of the paperwork, everything's golden." I froze. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears. Her voice dropped further. "No, I haven't told him yet. He doesn't need to know until it's done. She's old school. She'll care. That night, I moved my documents, the deed, the will, the house title, from my closet drawer to the garage, hidden in a mop bucket under old towels. It wasn't elegant, but it was safe. Vanessa wouldn't touch a mop unless it had a Chanel label on it. I didn't sleep much after that. I started locking my bedroom door at night. One morning, as I swept the hallway, Vanessa walked past me, clapped her hands twice, sharp and fast, like calling a dog. "You missed a spot," she said with a smirk. Daniel was right there. He looked up, looked away, and said nothing. That was the first time I felt my hands tremble around the broom. But I didn't drop it. I finished sweeping. I finished vacuuming the guest room. I even scrubbed the fridge, just like her little chart requested. Not because she asked, because I wanted to know what she'd do when I didn't resist. I wanted to see how far she'd go when no one pushed back. And she didn't disappoint. She began leaving her towels on the floor, leaving dishes in the sink with food still stuck to the sides. She'd say things like, "You're retired, you have time," as if I had volunteered for a live-in maid role. And when I didn't react, she started testing boundaries further. One evening, Daniel was in the shower. Vanessa leaned against the kitchen counter, watching me rinse spinach. "You know," she said casually, "you're lucky I let you stay here." I didn't look at her. I didn't speak. She tilted her head. Most women would want their own space after getting married. I kept rinsing. I heard the water go off upstairs. "This is my house," I finally said, not raising my voice. She shrugged. "For now." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I logged into my email and sent a message to my lawyer. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." I learned to stop underestimating her after that. Vanessa never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Her weapons were smiles, sighs, and silence. The kind that made you second-guess whether something actually happened. Her cruelty never left marks on the skin. She bruised places you couldn't point to. A week after I emailed my lawyer, I caught her at my desk. It was mid-afternoon, and I had just come back from the garden. Dirt still clung to my gloves when I stepped through the back door. The living room was quiet, too quiet. That's when I saw her, sitting at my desk in the far corner, her laptop open, notepad out, tabs open on the screen. She jumped when she saw me, quickly minimized the window. "Oh," she said, too lightly. "I was just looking up decor inspiration. You don't mind?" I didn't say anything, just walked past her, eyes drifting to the monitor before she shut it. I saw it. County property records, transfer of title, joint tenancy laws. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, still, like she was frozen in place. I went straight to my bedroom, shut the door behind me, and locked it. I sat on the edge of the bed, gloves still on, and breathed. Deep, controlled breaths. She had gone from entitled to dangerous. I didn't panic. I'd already moved the documents. I knew what she wanted, and now I had proof. Not legal evidence, but enough to know this wasn't about marriage, love, or a place to stay. She wanted my house, my name, my authority. She was carving me out of my own life, one passive suggestion at a time. I started paying attention to what she did when she thought no one was watching. The next few days were a playbook of her tactics. She started making subtle digs again, coated in sugar. "Louise, do you think maybe it's time you get some help with organizing the kitchen? It's starting to feel a little chaotic." Then she started doing things for me I didn't ask for, folding my towels, relabeling my flour and sugar, sorting my spices again. "You really should keep cumin and chili powder separate," she said, placing little printed tags on the jars. "They're confusing like this." I didn't ask for her opinion. She offered it anyway, with a smile that never reached her eyes. It was psychological war. And the worst part? Daniel didn't see it. Or if he did, he filtered it through the lens of love. Love that made him blind. Or maybe just tired. Every time Vanessa crossed a line, Daniel would excuse her. "She's just adjusting, Mom. She means well. You're reading too much into it." But I wasn't. I had lived too long to ignore instinct. And I'd been alone long enough to recognize when I was being phased out, made invisible in my own home. Vanessa didn't need to scream to make noise. She just redefined normal one small act at a time. She asked me to vacuum the guest room because Daniel's allergies were acting up. asked me to change the sheets because she was feeling run down, asked me to wipe the fridge because she was sensitive to smells. All said sweetly, as if we were coworkers. Or worse, I was her staff. I didn't argue. I didn't confront her, because I had already begun collecting things, dates, moments, screenshots. I downloaded a call recording app to my phone. I saved voicemails. I backed up every email I had with my lawyer. I took photographs, like the one of her laptop screen when she didn't see me behind her. And when I couldn't sleep, I took long walks in the evening, just to think, just to remind myself who I was before she arrived. The worst moment came, when I overheard her again, this time whispering in the laundry room. "I'm not here for love," she said. "I'm here for access." Her voice was low, sharp, calculated. "Once she signs the paperwork, we're good. His mom still has the deed. But that'll change." She paused, then laughed quietly. "She's practically handing it over. She doesn't even realize it." I froze outside the doorway, my stomach turning to ice. Access. She had said the word like. My son was a key, and I was a locked door. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up organizing files, making extra copies, and hiding a USB drive inside a container of old buttons in my sewing kit. The next morning, she was chipper. "Hey," she said as she poured orange juice into a glass she'd never washed. "Do you know where the deed papers are? I was thinking we could apply for a joint tax credit or something. It's better for us all, you know." I looked at her, steady. "That's not necessary." Her face froze for half a second. Just a flicker. Then came the fake laugh. "Oh, okay. I just thought it'd help." That's when I knew. She wasn't going to stop asking. She would circle and circle until I gave in, and if I didn't, she'd find another way to pry the house from under me. She wasn't playing checkers. She was playing chess. But I had stopped playing altogether. Now I was building my case. I started writing everything down in a notebook I kept under the cushion of the reading chair in my bedroom. I wrote dates, times, quotes. I recorded memories of my conversations with Daniel, how he responded, the words he used, because I knew where this was going. Vanessa didn't want to win by force. She wanted to win by rewriting the truth. She would chip away at my authority, my sanity, my credibility, until no one believed me, unless I had proof, unless I stayed quiet long enough for her to slip, unless I moved like water, slow, silent, steady. And when the time came, I wouldn't push her out. I'd let her walk right into the trap she thought she was building for me. I once read that true power isn't loud. It doesn't kick down doors or raise its fists. It waits, it watches, it builds, quietly, piece by piece, until there's no room left for denial. That's how Vanessa moved, like smoke, under a door frame. And I had let her in. But not anymore. After I overheard her talking about access and changing the deed, I started seeing her differently. I'd always known she was calculated, but that night something else settled into my bones. The understanding that she believed she'd already won, that she thought I was weak, disposable, a placeholder until the ink dried on whatever scheme she was orchestrating. The next morning, I retrieved my notebook from its hiding place and started filling pages, times, dates, conversations, her expressions, even the tone of her voice when she asked about documents. I became my own private investigator. I bought a small camera online, discreet, motion-activated. I installed it just above the office doorway, subtle enough that Vanessa wouldn't notice, but pointed right at the desk where she had opened my files before. I didn't feel guilty about it. That camera wasn't for revenge. It was for insurance. Vanessa, as usual, sensed nothing. She floated through the house like a queen already crowned. One afternoon, she breezed past me in the kitchen and said, "Hey Louise, do you have any information on property tax deadlines? I was thinking maybe we should look into joint homeownership benefits. You know, for the future." The way she said we, like she had built this house alongside me, like she had paid a single mortgage bill, painted a wall, mowed a lawn. I looked her straight in the eye. "I'm not planning any changes to the deed." She laughed too brightly. "Oh no, of course not. Just thinking long term. It's smarter when both spouses are on the paperwork. Daniel and I are in it for the long haul. Then he should be thinking about starting his own." She blinked, then smiled again, tighter this time. "Well, family's family. We look out for each other, right?" I didn't respond, I didn't have to. She was probing for cracks, but I'd already reinforced the foundation. The next morning, I noticed she was avoiding me. No cheery comments, no snide suggestions, silence. She was adjusting her strategy again. I could feel it in the air. Then came the shift. That Friday night, Daniel came home later than usual, weary-eyed and silent. He dropped his bag near the door and went straight to the shower without a word. Vanessa followed me into the kitchen. She leaned against the counter, sipping wine, watching me chop onions. "You know," she said after a long pause, "you're lucky I let you stay here." I stopped cutting, slowly set the knife down. She tilted her head, casual as ever. Most women would have wanted a fresh start, a clean break, their own place. But I told Daniel, "I get it. She's old. She's alone." I looked at her. "This is my house." She shrugged, swirling her wine. For now, that was it. No yelling, no storming out, just that one sentence and the flash in her eyes when she said it. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't talk. I didn't even eat dinner. I sat on the edge of my bed, stared at the darkened hallway, and opened my laptop. I found the folder I had been building, scans of my deed, digital copies of emails, the video clip from the hallway camera showing her copying files onto a flash drive. I drafted an email to my lawyer, attaching everything. Subject: Vanessa, action needed. Message: I'm ready to proceed. I didn't send it yet. I just saved it to drafts. I needed one more thing, a final confirmation that she wouldn't stop, that she believed she had the upper hand. I didn't have to wait long. The next day, Vanessa was out running errands, or so she said. Daniel was upstairs napping. I was watering the plants in the front yard when I realized I'd left my gloves in the garage. When I opened the side door, I heard rustling inside. I froze. The garage was dim, only the far window letting in a streak of afternoon light. I waited, barely breathing. Then I heard it again, a drawer being opened. I stepped forward silently, pressing my back to the wall. Another sound, paper being shuffled. Then footsteps, quick and light. The door creaked open, and there she was, Vanessa. She jumped when she saw me, startled for once. "Oh," she said, breathless. "Didn't hear you. I was just looking for a broom." Her eyes flicked to the mop bucket, the one I'd hidden the originals in. It had been moved. Not far, but enough. "I keep the broom inside," I said calmly. She blinked, then smiled too wide. "Oh, silly me. I must have mixed it up." She slipped past me, back into the house. I walked to the bucket, pulled it open. The towels were disturbed. The envelope that had held the deed was there, but empty. I didn't panic, because 2 weeks ago, I'd swapped the originals for copies. The real documents were now in a sealed envelope in a safety deposit box across town. She had stolen worthless paper. But the theft wasn't worthless to me. It was evidence. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, long after everyone went to bed. I sipped my tea, listening to the silence, and sent the email. Proceed with eviction paperwork. Confirm next steps. The next morning, I printed a second copy of the video. Her at my desk, the screen reflecting my name, the notepad in her lap. I sealed it in an envelope and wrote a note to myself. In case she denies everything. I tucked it into the drawer with the silverware. Let her play her game. I was done playing mine. It's strange how a single sound can slice deeper than 1,000 words. 2 quick claps. That's all it was. Not angry, not loud, just sharp. Precise, the way someone might summon a pen. "You missed a spot," Vanessa said, smiling sweetly as she walked past. I had been sweeping the hallway I had vacuumed just the day before. The same hallway where Daniel took his first steps. The same floor I had cleaned during flu seasons, after muddy storms, during nights I couldn't sleep. She clapped at me, like I was furniture that needed straightening. Daniel was there. He was standing at the end of the hall, near the stairs, flipping through his phone. He looked up when she said it, then looked away. That was worse than the clapping. His silence. His eyes that wouldn't meet mine. I said nothing. I finished sweeping that hallway with slow, deliberate strokes, even though my hands were trembling around the broom handle. When I reached the end, I turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Vanessa was leaning against the fridge, sipping from a glass of cucumber water like she had invented hospitality. She didn't speak. Neither did I. That night, I didn't clean the dishes after dinner. I didn't offer dessert. I went straight to my room and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the distant hum of their conversation from the living room. At one point, I heard her laugh. Daniel didn't. I checked my camera feed, motion-triggered clips from the office. There she was, again, sitting at my desk. Flash drive plugged in. I took another screenshot, then one from the hallway feed. Her figure, pausing just long enough in front of the office door to make sure Daniel was out of sight. I emailed both to my lawyer. Subject: continued evidence. Message: she clapped at me today, like a dog. I didn't cry, but my chest ached in a way I couldn't explain. The next morning, she changed tactics. She started being polite again, too polite. Her voice softened. Her questions turned sweet. Louise, do you want anything from the store? Louise, I put some lavender in your bathroom. Thought it might help you sleep. Louise, are you okay? You seem off lately. I knew what she was doing. She was priming Daniel, preparing her exit strategy in case I retaliated. If I snapped now, she'd have the foundation laid. I tried to be nice. She's unstable. She's acting out. So I played along. That week, she began mentioning money. During breakfast, while flipping through a home magazine, she said to Daniel, "Have you ever looked into home equity lines? I read that it's a smart way to use your property instead of just sitting on it." Daniel murmured something, not really listening. She waited, then added, "It's just safer when both spouses are on the title, for tax stuff, legal stuff. You know?" I didn't respond. I buttered my toast and stared at the window like I hadn't heard a thing. Finally, she turned to me. "Maybe you should consider adding Daniel to the deed. It's just cleaner that way." I set my butter knife down slowly. "It's already clean." She blinked, caught off guard. For a moment, the mask cracked. Her eyes hardened. Then the smile returned. "Of course." Just thinking out loud. 2 days later, I got a call from my bank. Someone had attempted to request my mortgage file. They flagged the request because the name didn't match mine. It wasn't Daniel's either. It was Vanessa's. I thanked the woman on the phone and hung up slowly. I didn't confront her. Not yet. That evening, she sat on the couch beside Daniel, phone in hand, scrolling through home renovation photos. "We should really do something with the kitchen," she said. "Open it up. Make it more modern. If it's ours, we should invest in it. Right?" That word. Again. Ours. Like if she said it enough, it would become true. Daniel looked at her, then at me. He didn't speak, just turned back to his phone. I got up and went to the sink, washed a clean dish, ran the water too long, just to hear it. That night, she tried again. She waited until Daniel went upstairs, then walked into the office like she owned it. I was watching from the hallway. I had left the door slightly ajar. She sat down, plugged in her flash drive, and opened my folders. I took a photo with my phone, her face reflected on the monitor. My name visible on the screen. The perfect shot. I saved it to my locked folder and emailed it to my lawyer immediately. She didn't know she'd been caught. The next day, I checked the folder where I kept copies of important files, receipts, the deed, notes from Daniel's college graduation. Several pages were missing. They hadn't been stolen carelessly. No, she had removed specific things that could hurt me if taken out of context. My letter to Daniel from years ago gone. My handwritten grocery ledger gone. 2 bank statements gone. She wasn't just after property anymore. She was trying to rewrite the story. That evening, I went into her room after she left for book club. I didn't believe there was any book club. Never had. Under the bed, I found a plastic folder. Inside, printed screenshots of my texts, a copy of my insurance document, receipts from the home office, even a draft of a fake joint account application with my name typed under hers. She was building a case, trying to make me look forgetful, erratic, unsafe. I put everything back exactly how I found it, closed the door behind me, walked to my room, and sat on the bed, listening. The house was quiet, heavy. That kind of quiet doesn't bring peace, it brings pressure, like something was about to break. And it did. Later that night, I overheard them arguing in their room. Her voice sharp, Angry, his muffled, tired. If you don't get her under control, I will. Those were her words. He didn't answer. Or maybe he did, and I just didn't want to hear it. In the morning, Daniel didn't look at me. He walked past me while I made coffee, didn't say a word. That's when I knew the eviction notice wasn't just for the house. It was the only way to protect my son from being devoured by the woman he thought he loved. The air changed that week. Not the weather, the atmosphere. Vanessa had stopped circling and started nesting, like a bird preparing to hatch something toxic. Her movements were slower, more intentional. Her tone had softened, she smiled more, asked less. But I didn't buy it. I knew better. People like her don't stop unless they're cornered or unless they've found a new strategy. And she had. It came on a Thursday, late afternoon. I was wiping down the counter, thinking about whether to make soup or just reheat leftovers, when she walked in from the front door. She was holding her stomach. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway like she was trying to decide which performance to deliver. Then she looked at me, voice light but loud enough to be overheard. "I think I'm pregnant." The sponge in my hand froze, mid-wipe. I didn't turn to her. I didn't need to. I could feel Daniel's reaction without looking. His footsteps hit the tile seconds later. Keys hit the floor. Then, "Wait. Really?" She nodded. Not shyly. Not nervously. She nodded like she had just sealed a business deal. "I wasn't sure," she said. "But I've been feeling different. I bought a test, too, actually." Daniel hugged her so tightly, I heard her exhale. He kissed her forehead. "This is a miracle." I kept wiping the counter, slowly, watching the streaks disappear one by one. My hands didn't shake. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even breathe for a moment. Because I knew exactly what this was. This wasn't a miracle. This was leverage. That night, they ordered takeout to celebrate. She made toasts about new beginnings and family unity. I sat there like a prop. When she clinked her glass against mine, she smiled. "Grandma's going to be busy." I smiled back. But inside, I felt cold, not sad, not scared, cold like steel, being forged in my chest. Because I'd seen her every tactic up to now, but this one was different. It wasn't just manipulation. It was a fortress, a way to shield herself from consequence. Pregnancy meant protection, sympathy, guilt. She could say and do anything now, and I'd look like a monster if I pushed back. For Daniel, it meant responsibility. That's what scared me most. Because for the first time since this began, I saw something return to his eyes. Hope, a future, a version of himself he could believe in again. She had given him that illusion, and he wanted to believe it so badly. Over the next few days, Vanessa transformed. She stopped doing chores, claimed she was too tired. She'd leave prenatal vitamins out on the counter like trophies. She refused to lift grocery bags, then told Daniel I hadn't offered to help. She slept in later, took longer showers, said smells were making her nauseous, then requested that I stop frying anything. She even changed her posture, hand resting gently on her belly, as if something was already growing there. But it wasn't her behavior that convinced me something was off. It was the inconsistencies. One morning I offered to drive her to the clinic, just to make sure everything's progressing well, I said. She declined. "I already have a private doctor." "Would you like company?" "I'm good, thanks. I don't want to make it a thing." Later that evening, she told Daniel she had her first ultrasound the next week. But the next morning, I overheard her telling her friend on the phone that it was this Thursday, bright and early. She was forgetting her own lies. I didn't say anything. I just started writing it all down, page after page. Dates, statements, contradictions. Then came the slip-up. I was doing laundry, a routine I didn't enjoy but did out of habit. Vanessa had left her jeans in the hallway basket, which was strange. She usually just left them on the floor. I reached into the pocket to check for tissues, and instead pulled out a crumpled pharmacy receipt. Emergency contraception, dated 2 days before she announced the pregnancy. For a moment I just stood there, holding the receipt like it was a weapon. My fingers trembled, not from age, but from what I finally, definitively knew. It was a lie, all of it. She wasn't pregnant. She never had been. I placed the receipt into an envelope, sealed it, and tucked it under my mattress. Then I made 3 copies. One went into my lawyer's folder, one into my safety deposit box, and the third, that stayed with me. That night, she caught me looking at her across the dinner table. She smirked. "Worried about your new title?" she asked. I tilted my head. "Are you sure you're pregnant?" Her smile froze. "What kind of question is that?" "Just wondering," I said. Then I stood and cleared my plate. Daniel followed me into the kitchen a few minutes later. "Why would you ask her that?" he said, voice low, but firm. "I didn't accuse," I replied. "I asked." "You're implying something." I turned to him. "Have you seen any proof?" He stepped back, frowning. "Why would she lie?" I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He left the room, slammed the bedroom door. Vanessa won again. But that was the last time I would let her. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. I handed him everything: photo evidence, camera screenshots, notes, and the receipt. He looked through them carefully, nodding more than once. Then he closed the folder and leaned back. "You need to serve her now," he said, "before she figures out you're 2 steps ahead." I nodded. I already knew what I had to do. The game wasn't over. But the board? It was about to flip. I didn't wait. After leaving my lawyer's office with the signed documents in my bag, I went straight home. There was no music playing in the car, no thoughts spinning in my head, just a strange, steady clarity, the kind that comes after a storm, when the wreckage is visible and there's nothing left to do but clean. I printed 2 copies of the eviction notice. One I folded and tucked into the kitchen drawer, the one where Vanessa kept her herbal teas and affirmations on sticky notes. The other I held in my hand as I sat at the dining table, staring out the window at my garden. The sun was beginning to fall behind the trees when I heard it, the scream, a raw guttural burst from deep inside the house. She had found it. I didn't flinch. I turned off the hose I'd been using to water the dahlias and stood with my back straight as the storm approached. Vanessa came stomping out the back door, waving the notice like it was a joke she didn't understand. "What the hell is this?" she yelled, eyes wide, hands trembling. I took off my gardening gloves and faced her. "It's what it looks like." Her mouth opened, but no words came out for a moment. She blinked hard, like she thought she could erase the reality with enough outrage. Daniel appeared behind her, shirt half-buttoned, sleep still in his eyes. "What's going on?" She turned to him, voice cracking. "Your mom is trying to throw me out. Can you believe this?" He looked at her, then at the paper in her hand, then at me. "What is this?" I kept my tone steady. "It's a formal eviction. She has 30 days to leave. You're welcome to stay." "She's not." Vanessa laughed, sharp, disbelieving. "You can't do this. You're insane." "I'm the owner of the house," I said, simply, "and I've had enough." Daniel turned to me. "Mom, can we talk about this?" "I've tried talking. You never listened." Vanessa stormed inside. Daniel followed, muttering something I didn't catch. I walked in after them, removed my boots, and went straight to my room, locked the door, sat on the edge of my bed, and waited for the silence to settle. That night, no one spoke. Vanessa made dinner, an overcooked lasagna she didn't plate for anyone else. Daniel didn't touch it. I stayed in my room, with a sandwich and a cup of tea, watching the hallway camera feed through my phone. No movement, just shadows, just stillness. Later I heard them arguing, first muffled, then louder. "She cried," he yelled. I didn't want to hear it, but the walls were thin. I caught fragments. "You lied to me. I did it for us. She's my mother. She's the reason we're not happy." I turned up the volume on my white noise machine. The next morning, I walked into the hallway just as Vanessa was throwing open dresser drawers, yanking clothes into a suitcase. She didn't look at me. Daniel was sitting on the edge of their bed, head in his hands. "If you stay here," she told him, voice shaking, "you're dead to me." He didn't respond. She stormed out moments later, dragging 2 overstuffed bags behind her. She stopped when she reached me. "You'll regret this," she said, eyes burning. I looked at her, calm, probably, but not today. She shoved the door open and muttered curses as she went. Daniel followed minutes later with nothing but his backpack. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at the house. They got into her car. She drove. He sat beside her like a ghost. I stood in the doorway for 10 minutes after they left, staring at the empty space they'd occupied. The house was finally quiet. But it didn't feel peaceful. It felt wrong. It felt broken. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't call anyone. I just cleaned the kitchen, washed the dishes they'd left, took out the trash, swept the hall. There was nothing else to do. Until the phone rang 1 week later. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer. "Mom," Daniel's voice came through the line. Flat. Small. "Can I come over?" I sat down at the table. "What happened?" "She cheated," he said. Silence. "She's been cheating." I didn't know who else to call. My heart clenched, not out of satisfaction, but out of mourning. Mourning for what he had lost, what he had allowed. I closed my eyes. "Come home." That was all I said. That was all he needed. An hour later I heard the engine, before I saw the car. He parked halfway on the grass, like he used to when he was late for school. When he stepped out, he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Red eyes, gray skin, wrinkled shirt. He held a duffel bag and his laptop. He stood on the porch for a second, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed inside. I opened the door and stepped aside. He walked in slowly and sat on the couch, head in his hands. I didn't speak. I waited. "She was seeing someone else," he said, voice hollow. "Maybe the whole time." "How did you find out?" I asked quietly. "She left her phone unlocked. She was in the shower. There were messages, photos." I confronted her. She didn't deny it, just said, "We were never happy." I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said. He looked at me like he was searching for judgment. Maybe a lecture, maybe an "I told you so." I gave him none of it. "You're here now," I said. "That's what matters." "I'm so ashamed," he whispered. I shook my head. "Don't be. You loved someone who lied to you. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." He started to cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, heaving sobs. I reached over and held his hand. We stayed like that for a long time. No words, just pain. And something close to peace. The first morning Daniel was back in the house. I made 2 mugs of coffee, just like I used to when he visited from college. He drank his quietly, hands wrapped around the ceramic like it was an anchor. I watched him from across the table, his face older, heavier, like the weight of the last year had finally settled in all at once. "She told me you were unstable," he said without looking up. "That you hated her for no reason, that you were trying to ruin our marriage." I didn't answer. I let the words land like dull knives on the table between us. He nodded, more to himself than to me. And I believed her. I finally met his eyes. "You didn't let her do that. She worked hard at it. She made sure to put a wedge between us." He rubbed the back of his neck. I should have seen it. "You see it now," I said gently. "That's what counts." Around noon, we heard a car door outside. Daniel froze. I peeked through the window. A courier was at the gate, with a large envelope. I stepped out and signed for it. The moment I saw her name in the corner, my stomach dropped. Rachel Vanessa Larson, legal counsel, enclosed. I walked back inside and laid it on the table. Daniel opened it. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. "She's suing you," he said in disbelief, "for emotional damages and wrongful eviction. She's saying you created a hostile living environment." I didn't respond. I just poured another cup of coffee. "She claims she's entitled to compensation because she contributed to the household." He scoffed. "She's actually trying to sue you for making her do laundry." Still, I didn't laugh. "This isn't about laundry," I said. "It's about leverage. She wants to scare us into offering a settlement. Make us flinch." "She picked the wrong people," he muttered. The next morning, I met with my lawyer again. I handed over the letter, along with every piece of documentation I'd been storing for months. Voice recordings, screenshots, video footage, the fake pregnancy receipt. He reviewed it all carefully, flipping pages in silence. After 10 minutes, he closed the folder and leaned back. "She's bluffing," he said. "She's hoping you'll panic. We won't even need to use most of this, unless she escalates. I want her out of our lives permanently," I said. Then we let her bluff, and we don't blink. That night, Daniel and I went through every cabinet, drawer, and file folder in the house. We made 3 sets of copies, one for my lawyer, one for the safe, and one for us. We shredded anything Vanessa could twist into a narrative. We updated passwords, changed the locks again, and reset the cameras. Daniel barely spoke. He worked with a quiet focus I hadn't seen since he was a teenager cramming for finals. I can't believe how deep she got into our lives, he said, stuffing old receipts into the shredder. She didn't infiltrate, I said. She was invited. That truth hurt him. I could see it. But he didn't deny it. Later that week, Vanessa's lawyer emailed a settlement offer. She'd drop the lawsuit quietly if we paid her marital relocation hardship. It read. I forwarded it to my lawyer. He replied with one line. Declined. Do not contact my client again. 2 days later, the silence arrived. No emails. No letters. No visits. She had folded. It wasn't a loud defeat. Vanessa never allowed herself to be seen losing. But that's exactly what had happened. She realized there was no angle left. No lie that would hold. No performance that would land. Daniel and I sat across from each other in the living room, reading the final correspondence from my lawyer. She really thought she could take this house, he said, shaking his head, like she earned any part of it. I didn't answer. He looked at me. You should have kicked her out sooner. I breathed in, slowly. You weren't ready. You had to see it for yourself. He nodded. He didn't argue. Then he asked me something that struck deeper than anything Vanessa had ever said. Can I move back in, for good? I froze. Not because I didn't want him here, but because I realized that this wasn't about a house. This was about us. The broken thing between us that had barely survived her. This time, I said carefully, we do it right. No secrets, no blind spots. He held out his hand across the table. Deal. That night, he brought in his bag from the hallway. He didn't ask which room to take. He just moved into his old one like he'd never left. And for the first time in months, the house felt still. Not empty. Not quiet in a threatening way. But I knew Vanessa wasn't completely done. People like her never leave clean. The next morning, I opened my email and found a message request. No subject, no name, just one line. You think you've won, but it's not over. I stared at it for a moment. Then I clicked block. I didn't tell Daniel. He didn't need that weight. She no longer had access to this house, to this life, to him. Her words were just static in the wind. I closed my laptop and stood up. That morning, I opened every window in the house. Not for the breeze, but to let her out. Her perfume still lingered in the corners, her labels still stuck to some of the containers. Her presence clung to places I hadn't noticed before, under the sink, in the back of the closet, the spot on the rug where she used to sit cross-legged and talk about her vision board. I threw out everything she'd touched. The candles, the fake succulents, the throw pillows that said live, laugh, love. Every piece of her went into a trash bag. Daniel didn't ask what I was doing. He just helped. The first thing I did after Daniel moved back in was open every window in the house. Not just to air it out, but to let the past escape. Every whisper of her, every trace of her perfume clinging to the curtains, every stale breath of control she left behind in closed spaces. The breeze moved through the rooms like it was searching for something to carry away, and I welcomed it. I took down everything she'd added. The framed quote in the hallway that read "Strength is quiet" gone. The lavender-scented candles she never lit but insisted made the house feel balanced. Trashed. The synthetic eucalyptus wreath she hung on the front door in October and refused to remove even after Christmas. I tossed it straight into a black garbage bag. Daniel walked in as I stood in the entryway, holding a framed picture of a watercolor fox she'd put in the guest bathroom. He didn't ask what I was doing. He just said, "Need help?" And then he started pulling things off the walls, too. The next day, we repainted the hallway. He picked the color, soft gray, almost silver, with a hint of warmth that caught the morning light. We painted in silence, side by side, the same hallway where she used to snap at me for leaving the light on, where she clapped at me like a dog. Now it was quiet. Just the sound of brushes and the occasional creak of the ladder as I held it steady while Daniel reached the edges. We didn't speak about her, not directly, but every stroke of paint felt like an answer, a chapter closed. On day 3, Daniel replaced the locks. Again, we sat on the porch after, sipping tea from mismatched mugs, watching the street like two people rediscovering a neighborhood they thought they'd lost. That afternoon, I found the apron she gave me for my birthday. The one that read Best House Manager in glittery gold letters. I'd stuffed it in the back of the pantry months ago, But now, holding it in my hands, I felt something harden in my chest. It had never been a gift. It had been a dig, an insult, dressed as a joke. I walked it out to the fire pit in the backyard and lit a match. Daniel watched from the back steps. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. When the flames died down, I went back inside and opened the drawer where she used to keep her renovation notes. Sketches, budget spreadsheets, magazine clippings of open-concept kitchens she wanted me to approve. We shredded every page. Then we reorganized the drawer. Manuals, warranty cards, grocery lists, real things, useful things, life things. Daniel started sleeping better. I heard it. Not the tossing and turning I'd grown used to when he first returned. Now his breathing was deep, steady, the kind you only hear from someone who finally knows they're safe. He woke earlier too. Made coffee for both of us. Sometimes he even brought in the mail before I reached the door. He started asking questions again, about people he hadn't mentioned in years, family friends, childhood neighbors, his piano teacher from 6th grade. He was coming back to himself, the version of Daniel before her. One night, after dinner, we laughed over a memory I'd nearly forgotten, how he tried to surprise me with pancakes on Mother's Day when he was 10 and nearly set the stove on fire. That laugh lingered. Not because it was funny, but because it was real. It was something we hadn't shared in months, maybe years. But there was one thing still hanging over me. A drawer in my bedroom. The bottom one. Locked. Inside, my original documents. Deed, will, power of attorney. They had lived in the dark too long. I pulled them out, spread them on the bed, and stared at them for a long time. Not in fear, but with purpose. It was time to update everything. I called my lawyer the next morning, told him I wanted to revise all my documents. Every page, every name, every contingency. I didn't want loose ends. I didn't want old vulnerabilities. He scheduled an appointment for the following day. When Daniel came into the kitchen, I told him I wanted him to come with me. Really? He asked, unsure. I nodded. We're doing it right this time. He agreed without hesitation. At the lawyer's office, we sat in the same chairs where I'd signed the eviction paperwork. But this time, there was no dread. Just clarity. The lawyer smiled as he flipped through the new files. Clean break. No contest. She's gone for good. On the way home, Daniel asked, "Do you think she'll ever come back?" I looked out the window, watched the trees blur past. She won't dare. But that night, I opened my laptop one last time to check emails. There was a message request sitting in my inbox. No subject, no name, just a single line. "You think you've won, but it's not over." I stared at it. My hand hovered over the mouse. Then I clicked block. No fear, no chills, just confirmation that she couldn't stand losing. That no matter how many games she played, how many lies she spun, she would never have the one thing she wanted most, control. I didn't tell Daniel. He didn't need to carry that weight. He was healing. This house was healing. And Vanessa no longer belonged to either. I shut the laptop, closed the lid, and moved on. There was nothing left to give her. Not space, not energy, not even a reply. The next morning, I started rearranging the kitchen, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I placed the flour and sugar where they used to be, put the spice rack back in alphabetical order. My order, the labels she'd stuck to jars, had already begun peeling at the corners. I removed them one by one until nothing remained but glass and clarity. No more sticky notes. No more suggestions. No more quiet power plays disguised as help. I was finally living in my house again. And this time, it truly felt like mine. I didn't realize how much I had been holding my breath until I stepped out into the garden. The soil was dry. In some places, cracked near the edges. Weeds had crept into the corners of the flower beds like they sensed weakness. My once bright marigolds were drooping. Some petals browned at the tips, the roses clung on with effort. The herb patch had scattered. Parsley overrun by mint, basil stalks, snapped low by weather or neglect. But they were still here. The roots had held. That's what I saw when I crouched beside the tomato vines. Tired, yes, but strong. Underneath, that's what I had been too, I suppose. Weakened, ignored, nearly choked, but still rooted, still here. I knelt down and began the quiet work of restoration. pulled the weeds out by the root, one by one. Cut away the dead parts, without flinching. My hands moved with memory. Dirt clung to my palms. And I let it. The sun was warm on my back, and for the first time in months, I didn't feel cold from the inside out. Daniel came out with 2 mugs of coffee. He sat on the back steps, just like he used to when he was a boy, watching me with that quiet curiosity that always lived in his eyes, even when he stopped believing I knew what was best. "Do you remember when you helped me build that planter box?" I asked, nodding to the wooden square near the fence. He smiled. "Yeah, I hammered the nails sideways. You insisted you didn't need help." I was 11, and proud. He sipped his coffee. "Still am." I sat back on my heels and looked at him. "You were always proud, even when she tried to make you feel small." He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I let her. "No," I said. "You loved her, and she took advantage of that." He ran a hand through his hair. "She said all the right things, made me feel needed, important. That's not the same as being loved." He nodded slowly. It wasn't until I saw the way she reacted to the eviction notice. It was like something cracked open. It wasn't grief. It was rage. Like I'd ruined her strategy. "She never mourned losing you," I said. "She mourned losing control." He didn't respond right away, just looked around the yard, like seeing it for the first time again. "This place, it feels different now," he said. "Like it can breathe." "It was never the house," I told him. "It was us." We worked together in the garden that afternoon. He trimmed the overgrowth from the shrubs while I fertilized the soil. We didn't speak much, but we didn't need to. There was something sacred in that silence, not the kind Vanessa left behind, thick and accusing, but the kind that felt like healing. A silence that said, "We're okay now." Later that evening, after dinner, I went into my bedroom and unlocked the drawer where I kept the newly updated documents. The deed, the revised will, the power of attorney, all tucked neatly into a fresh folder. I didn't hide it. I didn't bury it in some mop bucket or behind closet walls. I placed it right where it belonged. I no longer needed to protect myself from shadows. Vanessa wasn't in this house anymore. Not in the walls, not in the papers, not in the air. The next morning, I brewed the coffee. Daniel beat me to the porch. We sat side by side, listening to the birds, the same birds I had missed hearing when her playlist used to rattle the windows. He turned to me and said, "She told people you were controlling." I nodded. "I know." She said, "You hovered, made things uncomfortable, that you hated her from the start." I didn't hate her. I said. "I saw her. She almost convinced me." "She convinced you, because you loved her. That's not a flaw." He looked down at his mug. "She said I was weak if I didn't stand up to you." "And then what?" I asked. "She told you I was mentally unwell." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, she needed you to believe I was fragile. It was the only way she could justify taking my place." He exhaled. "I wish I'd seen it sooner." "You see it now." He looked up at me. "You never gave up on me." "No," I said. "But next time, I won't stay quiet either." He smiled. "Fair." That night, we had dinner at the table. No tension, no guarded silence, just warmth, just presence. We passed dishes back and forth without sharp words or forced small talk. We talked about old memories, his first bike ride, the goldfish he swore could do tricks, the time he tried to bake brownies and forgot the sugar. We laughed. We breathed. Afterward, I sat down at the kitchen counter with the folder in hand. I opened it, not to hide it, but to honor it. Everything was finally in order. There were no ghosts left in the margins. No traps. No fear. I filed it into the drawer beside the emergency numbers and the family photos I'd taken back out from storage. I didn't lock the drawer. This time, I didn't need to. And before I turned off the lights for the night, I walked through every room in the house. I didn't find silence screaming from the corners. I didn't find sticky notes or reorganized spices or subtle threats printed in cheerful fonts. I found peace. Earned peace. Not dramatic, not perfect, but real. And it was enough. The strangest part of healing is how ordinary it feels when it starts. No trumpet, no epiphany, just small choices stacked on top of each other like bricks. Repetition, steadiness, effort, without applause. That's how I knew things were shifting. Not because I felt triumphant, but because one morning I woke up and I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't check the locks 5 times. I didn't reread Vanessa's last message in my head. I just made my tea, opened the window, sat at the table with my newspaper, and read about a local farmer who rescued 3 ducklings from a sewer grate. I smiled. That was it. I didn't even realize I hadn't smiled in weeks, until that moment. Daniel came into the kitchen wearing a wrinkled shirt and sockless slippers, hair sticking up like it had when he was a teenager. He looked at me with a sleep-laced expression and said, "You're up early." I held up my mug. Old habits. He poured himself coffee, sniffed the air, and said, "You made muffins?" I nodded toward the oven. "Cranberry. They're a little tart." He took a bite. "They're perfect." And somehow, that sentence meant more than all the apologies he hadn't said. It wasn't about muffins, it was about choosing to be present, to be grateful, to acknowledge something that wasn't twisted or fraught, just good, just normal. He sat across from me. We didn't talk about her. We didn't need to. Instead, we started talking about the future. Slowly at first, like dipping our toes into cold water. He told me he wanted to go back to school, part-time, maybe finish his degree, maybe work with his hands again. Something that felt real. "I used to love building things," he said. "You still do," I reminded him. That afternoon, we went through the garage. We found his old tool belt, my father's hammer, a wooden crate full of rusted nails, and half-empty paint cans. He held each item like it was a relic, something sacred. "I forgot all of this was even here," he said. "No," I told him. "You just forgot who you were when you had it." We cleared the workbench together, wiped the dust off, a saw that hadn't been used since the back fence was replaced 6 years ago. Daniel ran his hand along the edge and smiled. "I might fix that bench by the garden," he said. I nodded. "And maybe we'll build a new planter. Together? Always." The next day, I found him sketching something on a yellow notepad, a blueprint, rough and simple, but it made me feel something close to pride. Not because he was productive or moving on, but because he wasn't stuck in the echo of her anymore. He was making noise again, his own noise. That evening, I went into my room and sat by the window as the sky turned orange. The house was quiet, but not empty. Not like before. I could hear Daniel in the garage humming, the distant hum of a drill, the occasional shuffle of footsteps. He was home. Not just here. Home. I reached for the folder of legal documents again, not because I needed to check them, but because I wanted to feel the weight of them in my hands. The decisions, the protection, the clarity, they didn't represent fear anymore. They represented freedom. Control returned, not in the form of rules, but in the ability to breathe without defending it. And just as I placed them back in the drawer, something else happened. The phone rang. Not the house phone, my personal cell. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated. For a split second, I thought, her. I answered anyway. A pause. Then a voice I hadn't heard in years. My sister. "Louise?" she said, tentative. "It's Marian." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Marian. It's been a long time. I saw something online. About the lawsuit." I didn't know what to say. "But, are you okay?" I smiled softly. "I am. Finally." "I always worried," she said. "When Daniel got married, I sensed something was wrong." "You weren't wrong," I said. "But it's over now." She exhaled on the other end. "Can I visit?" I looked out the window at the garden, at the soft light stretching across the grass, at the new bench. Daniel was halfway through rebuilding. "I'd like that." We hung up after exchanging dates and promises, and just like that, a bridge I thought had long since collapsed was rebuilt. Another quiet reclaiming. That night, Daniel and I sat outside as the stars blinked into view. He leaned back in the chair he'd fixed that morning. I leaned into the silence. "I saw you smile today," he said suddenly. "You saw right? Felt good." "It did." He turned toward me. "Can I ask something?" "Always. If she ever contacts me again, what should I do?" I thought for a moment. "You don't owe her a reaction. Just remember that. She feeds off attention, off noise, off panic." He nodded. "That's what I thought. Let silence be your boundary." He smiled. "Your strength is quiet." I laughed. "Don't quote her stupid wall art at me." He laughed too. "Fair. Then we sat there together, under the night sky, two people who had been broken, mended, and softened, not by any grand gesture but by stillness, honesty, and time. This was the life that waited for us. Not shiny, not perfect, but true. The morning after Marion called, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. Not to examine wrinkles or tug at my neckline the way I sometimes do when I feel the gravity of age, but to look myself in the eye. I hadn't done that in a while. Not really. Not with presence. Not with gentleness. There I was. Not broken. Not buried beneath someone else's voice. Just here. I reached for my favorite sweater. The green one, with soft edges and slightly stretched sleeves. The one I wore the day Daniel graduated. I hadn't worn it since Vanessa moved in. She once told me it looked dated, like something from a catalog nobody browses anymore. But I loved that sweater. I wore it anyway. Daniel was already in the kitchen, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. His hair was brushed, and he wore that same calm, gentle fatigue that had followed him lately. Not from stress, but from rebuilding, the kind of tired you earn after putting things back in order. He glanced up. "Green suits you." I smiled. "Good thing. I have no plans to take it off." We spent the morning working around the house. Not because we had to, but because it felt good to move. I folded linens while he measured the patio for a new railing. The rhythm of it was comforting, familiar, and when we broke for lunch, he brought out 2 bowls of soup and a slice of bread we baked together the night before. As we ate, he looked up from his bowl and asked, "Do you think she'll try to contact you again?" "She already did," I said. His spoon froze. "What?" "I didn't tell you because it doesn't matter," I added calmly. "One message. One line. I blocked it." His jaw tensed, but only for a moment. "I'm sorry. She doesn't matter anymore, Daniel. We can't keep letting her linger in doorways she no longer owns." He nodded, slowly. "I know. I hate that she ever got this far." "She only got as far as we allowed," I said, "but we've closed every door now, and this house belongs to us again." After lunch, I went into the guest room, the room Vanessa had claimed without asking, rearranged without permission, criticized with a smile. It looked different now. We'd painted it last week, pale ivory with sea green accents. The sunlight streamed in like it was celebrating the freedom. The bed was made with the quilt I'd sewn years ago, and the window pane was clean, no more sticky notes or taped reminders. There was just one thing left, the drawer. The bottom drawer of the old oak dresser, the one I had avoided, ignored, left untouched. I walked over, knelt down, and pulled it open slowly. Inside, a few of her old things she must have forgotten or ignored. A tube of lipstick, a dried-out highlighter, a folded pamphlet for some bridal expo, and tucked into the back, the apron. Best house manager. I burned the other one, but somehow this duplicate had survived. I stared at it for a long time. And then I laughed. A real, sharp laugh that broke the stillness like sunlight through clouds. She had always needed 2 of everything, one to show, one to hide. I picked it up, held it in my lap, then folded it into a square and set it in a donation bag. It didn't deserve fire. It didn't deserve rage. It deserved indifference. That was the real ending. Not revenge, not drama, just absence. I tied up the bag, carried it outside, and placed it with the others on the porch. Daniel would take them to the donation center in the morning. As I turned back, I saw the front garden. The hydrangeas I thought wouldn't bloom this year had burst open, heavy with petals, leaning into the wind like they were relieved. I knelt by them and ran my fingers along the edges. "Look at you," I whispered, "still blooming." That evening, I opened my old recipe book, the one Vanessa once criticized as too cluttered, with my handwritten notes in the margins and oil stains on the corners. I ran my fingers over the page for chicken soup, my mother's handwriting still faintly visible underneath mine. Daniel came into the kitchen, saw the book, and smiled. "Are you making that tonight?" he asked. I nodded. "It feels like a chicken soup kind of day." He grabbed a cutting board and started peeling carrots. We cooked together like we used to when he was little, him asking what came next, me pretending it was complicated, then handing him a task anyway. By the time we sat down to eat, the whole house smelled like memory. Warm, layered, honest. We didn't toast. We didn't make declarations. But when we clinked our spoons against our bowls and shared that first bite, it felt like ceremony, like something sacred. Later that night, I walked into my office, and lit a small candle on the desk. I sat down with my journal and opened to a blank page. I wrote, May 12. The drawer is empty. The house is full. I am whole. I closed the notebook, leaned back in the chair, and let the stillness settle. Outside, the wind picked up. The curtains lifted softly, like they were breathing. And for the first time since it all began, I felt nothing in the shadows. No fear, no threat, no unfinished business, just peace. When I finally went to bed, I paused in the hallway. The lights were dim, the rooms quiet. I reached out and gently closed the drawer in the hallway table, the one where Vanessa had once stuffed her plans, her notes, her ambitions. It slid shut with a soft click. A drawer that closed quietly. Exactly as it should be. I woke up before the sun, as I often do now. The house was still, not the tense, suffocating silence it used to carry when Vanessa was here. This silence was gentle, soft, like a house exhaling after holding its breath too long. I brewed tea in my favorite chipped mug, the one with the faint blue flowers around the rim, and wrapped myself in my robe. The early light filtered in pale and clean through the kitchen windows, casting soft shadows on the floor. When I walked through the living room, I paused by the bookshelf. It had once been filled with her things, design magazines, books she never actually read, but displayed for aesthetic, a fake succulent in a ceramic elephant pot. Now, it held my books again, my photographs. The small wooden carving Daniel made in middle school. I reached out and straightened a framed picture of my parents on their wedding day. I hadn't realized it had tilted. Morning, Daniel said from behind me. I turned to see him, groggy, barefoot, rubbing his eyes with one hand and holding a slice of toast in the other. He looked younger these days, lighter. Morning, I replied. You sleep okay? He nodded. Better than I have in years. I believed him. We didn't need to say it, but we both knew what today meant. 1 year. Exactly 1 year since she moved in. And what a year it had been. I thought about that first morning, when she entered this house with her roller suitcase and her soft, calculating smile. I remembered the way she eyed my living room like a temporary hotel lobby, the way she rearranged everything before she even unpacked. But those memories no longer had claws. They were just shadows now, flat and powerless. I spent the morning cleaning, not because it needed it, but because I wanted the house to shine. I polished the wooden banister, wiped the windows until they gleamed, and even refluffed the pillows on the couch, placing them exactly how I liked. Daniel stepped out in the afternoon with the donation bags from the guest room. I waved from the porch, then turned back inside and walked through every room of the house. Not with suspicion, not checking for what might be missing or sabotaged, just walking, seeing. The dining room was still, the table bare except for a small glass bowl of apples. The wall calendar showed the right month, not 3 months behind like it had been when I gave up trying to keep track. The office, once overtaken by her files and flashing laptop screen, was now my space again. The candle I lit the night before had melted into a smooth pool of wax. Its scent, lavender and sage, lingered in the air. I paused in the hallway. There was one more thing I needed to do. I opened a closet by the entryway, pulled out a small cardboard box I had almost forgotten. Inside, a few more of her leftovers. A journal, a chipped mug, a scarf I'd never seen her wear. I took the box to the backyard and placed it by the trash bins. I didn't look inside again. I didn't dig through it like I used to, searching for clues or evidence. It wasn't mine to carry anymore. When I came back inside, I opened the windows again, let the breeze roll in through the kitchen and out the back screen. The curtains lifted softly in the draft, and for a moment I stood still and just listened. No music, no slamming doors, no clapping hands behind me, just birds, and the wind, and the occasional creak of the floorboards adjusting to the temperature. That afternoon, I pulled out a fresh journal, not the one I used to document everything, not the evidence ledger, a new one. On the first page, I wrote, "Today, my house is free. Today, I am not waiting to be questioned. Today, I am not being watched. Today, I am home." I closed the journal and placed it in the drawer by my bed. Later, I found Daniel in the backyard, kneeling beside the half-finished bench planter. "You think it's too wide?" he asked, standing to wipe his hands on a rag. I tilted my head, maybe by an inch. "But I like it. I'm going to plant lavender." "Good. The bees will love it." He looked at me, then nodded. "You were right about everything." I stepped closer, reached out, and touched his shoulder. "No, I was just persistent." That evening, we sat down to dinner together again. Nothing fancy. Roasted chicken, potatoes, and greens from the garden. But we set the table properly. No TV in the background, no distractions, just 2 chairs, 2 plates, and candlelight. Halfway through the meal, Daniel looked up. "I don't know who I was with her." "You were trying," I said. "That's not a failure." "I feel like I missed a year of my life." "You gained something more important." "What?" "The awareness to never lose yourself again." We finished dinner slowly. No rush, no unease. Just quiet. Just peace. And when I stood up and carried my plate to the sink, I paused. One last look around. Everything was as it should be. No ghosts. No battles waiting in the corners. Just light.